Good morning, and we're coming on the air at this hour because President Trump is meeting with his cabinet at the White House right now over the growing crisis in Syria. The president discussing how to respond to the suspected chemical attack blamed for killing dozens of civilians in Douma, near the capital city of Damascus. It is believed the attack was carried out by the Syrian regime, and in a series of tweets, President Trump calling Syrian President Assad an animal. He also says Russian President Vladimir Putin and Iran are responsible for backing Assad, and the president warning that there will be a, quote, big price. Let's get right to ABC's chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. She's live in Washington. And Martha, the last time about a year ago, we know it was just 3 days before the U.S. struck after first evidence of chemical warfare back then. What kind of proof are they looking for right now, and what action could come?
Well, what they did last year, the last time they struck, was they had actual satellite imagery. They knew what kind of aircraft dropped those bombs that contained chemicals. This time they'll look and see if they have the same kind of evidence. They'll try for tissue samples. They'll try for soil samples. But those are going to be very, very hard to get because this is the Assad regime, and they'll be looking out for that, and they'll want to bury that evidence.
And in fact, the Pentagon a year ago releasing that flight path. Very quickly, let's get to Cecilia Vega at the White House. The president creating his own red line a year ago, a new one.
Yeah, he said that he was moved, David, by seeing those horrible photos that we saw in Syria the last time around, moved deeply on a personal level. And then we saw those Tomahawk missiles go in. I believe we're hearing the president right there, David. Let me know if you want me to stop talking.
Yes, let's listen.
I'll keep going.
With
and
banned
he says
chemical weapons. It was an atrocious attack. It was horrible. You don't see things like that, as bad as the news is around the world. You just don't see those images. We are studying that situation extremely closely. We are meeting with our military and everybody else, and we'll be making some major decisions over the next 24 to 48 hours. We are very concerned when a thing like that can happen. This is about humanity. We're talking about humanity, and it can't be allowed to happen. So we'll be looking at that barbaric act and studying what's going on. We're trying to get people in there. As you know, it's been surrounded, so it's very hard to get people in because not only has it been hit, it's been surrounded. And if they're innocent, why aren't they allowing people to go in and prove? Because, as you know, they're claiming they didn't make the attack. So if it's Russia, if it's Syria, if it's Iran, if it's all of them together, we'll figure it out, and we'll know the answers quite soon. So we're looking at that very, very strongly and very seriously. I'd also like to provide an update on trade negotiations. We have a situation with China where we have a very good relationship with China, and I think we'll maintain that relationship. I'm very good friends with President Xi. I have great respect for President Xi. And as you know, I spent 2 days in China. The president spent 2 days with us at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and they were 4 great days. With that being said, China has been taking advantage of the United States for many years. Really, if you look at it, since the start of the World Trade Organization, and they have really done a number on this country. And I don't blame China. I blame the people running our country. I blame presidents. I blame representatives. I blame negotiators. We should have been able to do what they did. We didn't do it. They did. And it's the most lopsided set of trade rules, regulations that anybody's ever seen. With that being said, we have many of them. NAFTA was a horrible deal. We're renegotiating it. We'll see what happens. But we're strongly renegotiating NAFTA. If you look at the European Union, they have tremendous barriers, trade barriers. We essentially have bad deals with everyone. We're close to finishing a deal with South Korea, which was a horrible deal. It was going to give us 200,000 jobs. Well, that didn't exactly happen. It gave them 200,000 jobs. We lost jobs. And it was a horrible deal. And that's being renegotiated. And we have We have a long way to go, but we've made a tremendous progress. We're fairly close on NAFTA, and if we don't make the right deal, we'll terminate NAFTA, and we'll make the right deal after that. But we have a chance to make a deal on NAFTA. And as I said, the North Korea and South Korea situation, which complicates it, the deal that we have with South Korea, I think is going to be, it's going to be a very fair deal. We want a fair deal, and we don't have fair deals. North Korea, by the way, as you've probably seen, and we've been in touch with North Korea, we'll be meeting with them sometime in May or early June. And I think there'll be great respect paid by both parties, and hopefully we'll be able to make a deal on the de-nuking of North Korea. They've said so. We've said so. Hopefully it'll be a relationship that's much different than it's been for many, many years. This should have been done by other presidents, and they decided they didn't do it. They couldn't have done it. But it would have been a lot easier if it were done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, a lot easier than now. But we have a meeting that is being set up with North Korea, so that'll be very exciting, I think, for the world. I think it's going to be a very exciting thing for the world. We're going to be talking about opioid today, opioid destruction and drug destruction. As you know, we strengthened up our southern border. Last year we had record low numbers. This year they've gone up. To a certain extent, it might be because our economy is good and people are trying to come into our good economy. But we're putting the National Guard and military at the border. We're beefing up the Border Patrol, who've done a fantastic job. ICE has done a fantastic job, and we will take care of that situation. We need a wall. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, we need a wall. And it'll stop your drug flow. It'll knock the hell out of the drug flow, and it'll stop a lot of people that we don't want in this country from coming into our country. But right now, we're putting the military and we're putting the National Guard, and we're going to have very strong borders. We have strong borders now, but they're going to be much stronger. And with that, the cabinet meeting will begin. We're going to be discussing a lot of different elements of what's going on. The country is doing very well. We've created 3 million jobs since the election. We have 700,000 jobs in the last number of months. The numbers are starting to come out from companies, corporations. They're doing incredibly well. It's very solid. Our country is on very solid footing. When we do a deal with China, which probably we will, if we don't, they'll have to pay pretty high taxes to do business with our country. That's a possibility. But if we do a deal with China, if during the course of a negotiation they want to hit the farmers because they think that hits me, I wouldn't say that's nice, but I tell you, our farmers are great patriots. These are great patriots. They understand that they're doing this for the country. And we'll make it up to them. And in the end, they're going to be much stronger than they are right now. Don't forget, farmers have been trending downward over an 8-year period. Their numbers have trended downward, in some cases significantly. So between NAFTA and China and all of the things we're doing, we're going to make them much better than they've ever been. But during this period of time, Sonny Perdue is here. He understands exactly what I'm saying. There'll be a little work to be done, but the farmers will be better off than they ever were. It will take a little while to get there, but it could be very quick, actually. But I say it's not nice when they hit the farmers specifically because they think that hits me. So with that being said, we're doing very well on trade and trade deals. I think deals will be made. I think we're going to make deals with a lot of countries that have taken advantage of us. And we will be reporting back to everybody. And we'll start our cabinet meeting. And thank you all, media, press. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to make a decision on all of that. In particular, Syria. We'll be making that decision very quickly, probably by the end of today. But we cannot allow atrocities like that. Cannot allow it. He may, yeah, he may. And if he does, It's going to be very tough. Very tough. You'll pay a price. Everybody's going to pay a price. He will. Everybody will. Excuse me?
U.S. military action, is it off the table as it relates?
Nothing's off the table. Nothing's off the table.
Is there some doubt as to who was responsible for this, guys?
Well, they're saying they're not, but to me, there's not much of a doubt. But the generals will figure it out probably over the next 24 hours. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Are you concerned about the stock market?
No, not at all. No. The market's up today very substantially. No, not at all. Don't forget, our country's going to be much stronger when this is all finished, just so you understand. You know, these trade deals are horrible. Our country is going to be much stronger when this is finished. Okay? So that's very important. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
President Trump at the White House talking about trade, talking about borders, but it was Syria that the world is watching him. He talked about the chemical attack, saying it was an atrocious attack. It was horrible. You just don't see these images. Going on to say this is about humanity. Moments ago, he was asked, is military action off the table? He said nothing is off the table. Our own correspondent, John Carl, in the room, asking if Putin was behind it. He said he could be, and if so, there would be punishment for that. I want to bring in our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz. Hard to believe, Martha, a little more than a week ago, you and I were on the air shortly after the president said on a stage in Ohio, we are coming out of Syria very soon. Let the other people take care of it now. It appears the president today being forced into reacting and taking care of the situation that we witnessed in Syria over the weekend. And he said the decision could come as early as the end of today.
Yeah, and David, he seemed to have no doubt that it was a chemical attack. He said, no doubt to me, not much of a doubt at all. And of course, he tweeted over the weekend that he thought it was a chemical attack. He said he will leave it to his generals to determine that. And of course, David, when we were talking a week ago, he was talking about pulling out because of the progress made against ISIS. This is a very different situation, but he is getting some criticism for saying that last week, saying that possibly that's what brought this on.
Martha, thank you. I want to bring in Ian Pannell, our senior foreign correspondent. He's live in London watching this unfold. And Ian, you heard the president there say if it's Russia, if it's Syria, if it's Iran, if they're all together on this, we will figure it out.
Yeah, and how do you figure it out in such a short period of time? I mean, the truth is that to assess whether or not there has been a chemical attack takes the OPCW, the Organisation for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons. They need to send in a team of experts. You need to get samples. You need to assess it. And as Martha said earlier, the attack that took place 12 months ago, it was much easier to get those samples because it happened in a part of Syria that borders Turkey. So you could just get it across the border quickly and get it tested. And ultimately, that is what happened. And the blame was laid firmly at the foot of Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. This time you're in an enclave that's surrounded by the Syrian regime forces as well as the Russians. Now, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has already said they've sent in a team of experts. They've looked at it and they said there's no evidence of chemical attack. Well, we've been speaking to media activists on the ground who are telling ABC News that that isn't true, that there was a small group who went in there. They were there for 20 to 30 minutes, didn't take any samples. And even if you had taken samples, you couldn't assess it at that point. But the question remains, if the president wants to act, he'll have to do it without any multinational authorization. And how do you do it?
All right, Ian Pannell with us as well. Ian, thank you. And as Ian points out, U.S. intelligence now looking for proof of a chemical attack. The Russians, a short time ago, saying they have been in and found no evidence. Not terribly surprising coming from the Russians at this hour. Again, President Trump saying action, a decision on any action in Syria after evidence of those chemical attacks. The video that played out all over the world could come within 24 to 48 hours from the White House. For more on the breaking developments as they happen, download the ABC News app and sign up for breaking news alerts. Our entire team working this all day. I'm David Muir. I'll see you later today for World News Tonight. Until then, good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Alice Parks. You're watching our continuing coverage on ABC News of President Trump there speaking at a cabinet meeting, responding to those atrocious images out of Syria over the weekend. What looks to be an apparent chemical weapons attack near Damascus, and the President of the United States saying that the United States would respond or make a decision about a response in the next 24 or 48 hours. The President looked upset and called what he said he had no doubt of an attack. He called it atrocious, barbaric. But he also acknowledged that we were still in perhaps a fact-finding stage. His tweets over the weekend and again today saying that there was, whether or not it was Russia or Iran or Syria, he would find out. I'm joined by Martha Raddatz, our co-anchor here at ABC. Martha, you were talking earlier about the fact that there would be this fact-finding investigative stage with international actors, but I'm also curious what options, military options, you see as potentially on the table should the president decide to go that route.
Well, as we remember last year, what they did was that they just bombed the airfield where they believe the aircraft had taken off that dropped those chemical weapons on those innocent civilians. This time, you would think they would have to do a much broader, bigger missile strike because of the fact that Assad, if they believe that is what happened here, and clearly the White House believes that, if they believe he did it, they're going to have to do something broader and bigger because he didn't get the message last year.
Martha, thank you so much. I know you'll be following this all day. We also have Cecilia Vega there on the White House lawn. Cecilia, it turns out that today is also the first day of the National Security Advisor, the new National Security Advisor, John Bolton. What do we expect his role is in all of this? What do we expect he is saying in the room in these meetings?
Well, this is his very first meeting in there, Mary Alice, as you said, and we could see him in that shot of the president sitting right behind President Trump, his first day on the job. And we know that he has, in fact, been a vocal advocate in the past for airstrikes on Syria, and that he's had harsh words, very public harsh words, for the Obama administration for not doing more, as he said, for falling short when it came to handling the crisis in Syria. So I expect that there are some tough conversations happening in that room right now. The cameras weren't allowed in for the rest of the conversation. They were cut off right as the president stopped talking there. We were kicked out, I should say. But, you know, the big question for this White House right now is whether these new images coming out of Syria have prompted President Trump to change his mind on whether he wants to still withdraw these 2,000 U.S. troops there that are in Syria right now. Just days ago, that was the plan that he had expressed very publicly, so much to the frustration of many on his own national security team. So I imagine that is part of the conversation that is, or the agenda, I should say, rather, front and center for this conversation happening right now.
Senator John McCain, obviously over the weekend, saying that he thought it was those words from the president talking about getting out of Syria that might have led Putin or Bashar al-Assad to feel emboldened, with Senator McCain's words over the weekend. Do you think the president is responding now or taking to heart some of this criticism from Republican lawmakers that he should do more or might have emboldened some of these actors with his words last week?
I can't imagine that President Trump is planning his policy based on a tweet from Senator John McCain of Arizona at this stage of the game, given that there seems to be no love lost between those two at this point. But you're right, Mary Alice, it's not just John McCain, it's Lindsey Graham, who also is drawing the same conclusion. And he says that this could be a defining moment for this presidency and this administration. And we very much know that just last year, right around this time, the president said that those images that we saw coming out of Syria of those children moved him so deeply and so personally that is what prompted him to act the last time around. And here we are again talking about a decision that he will make within the next 24 to 48 hours, and we will see what he does.
Well, thank you, Cecilia, for all of your questions and reporting there from the White House. I also have one of our team members, Justin Fischel, who's been reporting about some of the work that the National Security Council officials are doing to try to get to the bottom of what might have actually happened there in Syria over the weekend. Still no conclusive report or conclusive assessment from the American sort of intelligence officials. What do we know about when they might reach a conclusion or what they're trying to find?
Right. Well, Mary Alice, the president says he's going to come up with a decision in the next 24 to 48 hours, possibly a decision as soon as tonight. The problem is, as it stands, they don't have conclusive evidence. The images are quite clear. Anybody looking at it, like the president, we know he's focused on these images, he's said as much. Anybody looking at the images can see there's clear indications of a chemical attack. But that's not necessarily enough to go on for the U.S. military. They're going to want what one NSC official described to me as a conclusive assessment. That requires getting intelligence off the ground. The problem is that this attack happened just outside of Damascus, which is a Assad stronghold. And 1 year ago when this happened, it was in a more rebel-friendly area, if you will. So it was easier to get tissue samples and other things out. Other information that would lead you to conclude that this was a chemical attack. So the president and the U.S. military, frankly, are under a lot of pressure now to get that information as quickly as possible so they can make an informed decision. But the president seems to think that's going to come within the next 24 to 48 hours.
Right. I mean, how can they do that level of investigative work so quickly in a war zone?
Well, it's possible. One official did caution to me today that it could take as much as a week. And, you know, first of all, I think it's also important to remember how striking it is that this happened just a week after the president said he declared at a political rally in Ohio with no warning that he wanted to withdraw the 2,000 U.S. special operators from Syria. As we pointed out, McCain and others believe Assad was emboldened by those remarks and were listening, and that this may have, in fact, been a message to the president. And pulling out those 2,000 troops would be a big deal. As we reported last week, that decision to make that announcement was, the president had not consulted even his most senior cabinet officials. That idea of pulling out those 2,000 troops was only being discussed among a handful of people, and he had not told them before making that announcement that he was going to say that, which is quite startling. So we'll see what happens here.
And also striking and noteworthy over the weekend, the president, for the first time in one of his tweets, going after Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying that Putin might have been directly involved or at least encouraged Assad potentially by supporting that regime over the last few years. We saw there again in that cabinet meeting, the president saying that he will find out whether this was Syria or Russia or them working together. What do you make of the fact that the president seems to be changing his rhetoric here and talking directly against the Russian involvement in that country?
There's been a lot of reluctance by the president to call out Vladimir Putin directly. His approach to Russia has been stay friends with the president, but keep our harsh and aggressive policy measures in place. This weekend, he deviated from that stated policy, and he went after Putin directly. He said Putin is responsible for this attack in no uncertain terms. Putin, of course, is allied with the Syrians and the Iranians in fighting against the rebels. So that certainly ratcheted up the rhetoric in a way we have yet to see from this president as it pertains to Putin directly. And then for the Russian part, they warned essentially against a U.S. military strike, saying there would be serious consequences if there was a U.S. military response. Now, the president, remember, called the strikes 1 year ago following that separate chemical attack a warning shot, essentially. That time being a warning, next time being something more serious. So the big question is he going to do something, and is it going to be more serious? I believe there were 56 Tomahawk missiles launched last time around, a year ago, hitting a Syrian airfield where they believe the chemical strike was what took off from. So that's a big strike, and to up the ante from that would be quite significant.
And we'll be following all of those questions today and surely the rest of this week. You can come back and watch the briefing room and our coverage of that in just a few hours. Make sure you download the ABC News app. Thank you, Justin. I'm Mary Alice Parks with ABC News.